You're listening to Physician Non-Clinical Careers with John Jurica, the podcast that inspires, encourages, and teaches physicians how to pivot to a new career. I'm here to help you pursue a career that brings you joy and pays well. Episode number 108, How to Become a Popular Freelance Consultant. Interview with Dr. Christopher H. Liu, MD, PhD. Welcome back to the show. Today we get to learn about becoming a freelance consultant with Dr. Christopher Liu. Christopher is a retired surgeon, serial entrepreneur, an investor, consultant, executive coach, best-selling author, and advisor. He received his MD PhD from the Baylor College of Medicine, Rice University Department of Bioengineering. Christopher has extensive consulting experience working with hospitals, tech startups, high net worth clients, and executives over the past 12 years. He's built a successful business brand and career, authoring 3 books and speaking extensively about business, financial freedom, and entrepreneurship to audiences worldwide. I asked him to come on the podcast because his just released book is called The Physician's Guide to Financial Freedom, Getting Started as a Consultant, How to Launch and Brand Your Unique Skill Sets to Position, Leverage, and Capitalize on Niche Consulting Opportunities. That's a mouthful for sure, but definitely right up our alley. Because I wanted to talk with Dr. Liu because I believe that many of you are in a great position to begin your own consulting business. It's a business that you can build gradually, but like Chris, you have skills that can be leveraged to generate income and leave clinical medicine if that's what you'd like to do. Okay, now let's find out what Christopher Liu likes about consulting and his advice for creating your own freelance consulting career. Dr. Christopher Liu, welcome to the PNC podcast. Thanks for joining us today.
Good morning, John. Thanks, John, for having me on the podcast. I'm really happy to be sharing my time with you.
Yeah, this worked out really well. It's a topic that I've been looking to talk about for a while. And, we met, it's almost a year ago. And I've been thinking, well, how can I get Chris on the podcast? And then lo and behold, you published a book. So I thought, well, that'll be the perfect segue into an interview about an important topic. So I really appreciate you coming on today.
My pleasure.
So yeah, I haven't, I've spoken to some guests who have started businesses. Some have stayed small, some have grown into, even businesses that have been sold and now are publicly traded. But I don't think I've actually spoken to anyone specifically about working as a consultant. And I think we're talking about, just for the listeners, is sort of a freelance consultant, not a consultant for a big firm. Is that right?
Right, exactly. Yeah, my target niche is physicians looking to brand themselves as consultants for whatever segment or market that they're looking for. But of course, like you mentioned, there are the consultants for the big name firms, but mine focuses more on the freelance consulting side.
Got it. Okay. Well, let's see. So we're going to get into that, including a short discussion perhaps about your book, which addresses this as well. But why don't you go ahead and give us a little background about your education? And you were practicing for a while, I understand, and then you kind of pivoted and never looked back from what I understand.
Yeah, so I grew up in Houston, Texas, and got a full scholarship from the Terry Foundation for undergrad. Then I went to Baylor for medical school, part of the MD PhD program. And my PhD was in bioengineering at Rice University. And that's where all of my entrepreneurial ventures started. I had a lot of free time, and I started a couple of side hustles, mainly in real estate and stocks. And those companies eventually set me financially free by the age of 29. So, and as a result of my ventures during grad school, I had a couple of realizations. One was, in the traditional sense, where you trade your time for a paycheck as an employee, it was, as an entrepreneur, is a little bit different because you have to be able to see and create value for whatever niche marketplace that you're offering the value to. So that's either by solving people's problems or finding and filling needs. And the second realization was that I really couldn't work for anybody, so I didn't really want or need a boss. So that was helpful in that sense. The third thing was that I saw with technology how it was leveling the playing field. So industries were previously that had high barriers to entry, technology was demolishing that. So you're able to enter a lot of industries. You're able to start a lot of companies, sometimes even for free, with just internet, a laptop, and a smartphone. And so as a result of that, you could work from anywhere, anytime, with or without anyone, using just a with just these new technologies. So after graduating medical school, matched into an orthopedic surgery residency at New Jersey's Rutgers University. So, and this is the part where it gets interesting, because most people at this point, especially 11 years ago, my friends, my family, colleagues, and especially my current clients, they all said I was crazy to leave clinical medicine. But fast forward 10 years later, 11 years later to 2019, it was the best decision I ever made in my entire life. It was the best. And so two factors. One was that I had no passion I just had no passion for it. So if I didn't want to be spending that amount of time and energy into a career that I didn't have any heart for. So I'm an entrepreneur at heart, and I wouldn't be able to fulfill my potential in the traditional sense if I just continued on that traditional pathway. So I was always building things, creating things. I always looked up to the Steve Jobs, the Zuckerbergs, the people that were changing the world.
So Chris, let me jump in for a second. Maybe I can pile on. Oh my God, you're in an ortho residency. You graduate. You can do surgery. You're one of the highest paid, specialties. But really, that just didn't float your boat, right? It just wasn't what you wanted to do.
Yeah, it was just like the thing was, I wrote in my first book, I loved med school, I loved grad school, but then it was just you just want to. The first day of residency, you just go in and it's just like, oh my God, what did I get myself into? And it wasn't the fact that it was more of the system. It was just very dysfunctional and broken. And I saw where healthcare was going 20 to 30 years down the road, and just the amount of time and investment, like 20 years, 30 years, it just wasn't worth it anymore. So I saw more potential and opportunity and more growth as an entrepreneur.
I gotta hand it to you, because most of us actually had to go through semi or complete burnout before we really figured out that the system was, crappy, basically. And you had the vision to look at it and go, this is not really a good system to work in.
Yeah, yeah, and it's funny that you say that, because I remember it was the height of the financial crisis. I think Lehman Brothers was on TV. They had filed for bankruptcy, and I just took that leap of faith. I walked into my chairman's office. I turned in my badge, keys, and pager, and never looked back. And as they say, the rest is history. So,
very cool.
Yeah, and because I gained my financial freedom, because I took that leap of faith back in 2008, built my companies, I was able to retire 3 years ago. And so I took a year off, did a lot of introspection, decided what was the next action phase of my life and career. And I saw the people that were influencing people, and what they were doing was they were giving back, they were contributing, they were mentoring, inspiring, educating, and influencing others. So that's why I launched my freelance consulting business, which encompasses executive coaching, advising, writing, and speaking.
Very nice. So that makes sense, right? If you've kind of accomplished some things, you've learned some things, you've implemented them, and then you can turn around and share what you've learned and go ahead and, make a career out of it.
Yeah, exactly. So, and it's actually been really rewarding, because, we'll talk about it later, but, consulting is, offers a lot of advantages. And, that's why I wrote my book. Part of it was to educate physicians on, the advantages and how to get into consulting, freelance consulting, and all of that.
Awesome. Can you tell us what type of consulting you're doing? Obviously, there's probably thousands of things that people could consult firms and individuals and so forth about. So what is it to be, Dr. Lou and a consultant? What would I consult you for, and how would we interact, and what would you be offering?
Yeah, so great question. I have a lot of one is I'm really big into technology. So I consult with a lot of hospitals. So a lot of these hospitals, when they were implementing their electronic health records, they brought me on board as a outside advisor, just working with the physicians, with the nursing staff, the best way to implement the electronic health records. And it's it's really interesting because, they're, going from a paper system to an electronic health record system. It's actually quite challenging. There's a number of variables you have to address. So, I would help the physicians with, learning the system, how to use it, and then further from there, how to personalize, optimize their workflows and all of that. So
let me ask you about that, because I remember when the hospital I was working at, when we decided to implement one of our first EMRs, there's we had to create 7 or 8 teams focusing on everything from, marketing to implementation to change management. And several committees they all involved physicians and they all interacted with physicians. So in your consulting role, are you focusing more on the part that would, affect the physicians, or are you kind of over helping them kind of create the entire structure for the transition?
Yeah. Oh, great question. So, my niche was it for physicians. So mainly it was to help them. I didn't really work with the build. But I did interact with those individuals that were involved in the build of the electronic system. But my primary focus was on physicians. So main thing was just to save them time and energy in using it, so that they could focus more of their time on patient care and decision making and the clinical judgment. So, go ahead.
So that's the process of using the system and how to optimize it for them, almost like what sometimes what informatics does, but protocols and all those kind of things, right? Where physicians need input, but they don't want to spend, 8 hours a day working on that, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so what I would do was I would, interact with the physicians, and I would take their recommendations and, their ideas and bring it to the build team to see how they could further improve those workflows and how to better streamline the processes and all of that.
All right. Now, I would imagine that most hospitals now have some EMR, not all. Has that part of your consulting been slowing down and you've been focusing on new things? How's that going?
Yeah, so great question. So yes, most hospitals have gone live already. So that's sort of phasing out right now. So now what I'm doing is I've transitioned into working with technology startups. So that's either because I love technology and the power of it. So one part of it is where I'm working with a healthcare technology startup where we're designing an artificially intelligence-based app that can streamline the patient intake and documentation for emergency rooms. So that's just started last year, so we're still in the early phases. So I do that, and I'm also involved in telemedicine as well. And then the other segment that's really been taking off and growing is my coaching. So I do a lot of private coaching for select clients, and I do a lot of online group coaching as well. So that's been growing as well. So
interesting. Okay, so is that sort of what would fall in the category of like executive coaching? That kind of thing, business coach, that sort of thing?
Yeah, executive coaching, business strategy, career strategy. So my 3 niches or my markets are, one, I have a group of physicians that are either contemplating or are in the process of transitioning. And then the other segment, so those usually work well with my online group coaching. And then the other market is for physicians that have already transitioned and they're looking to launch either their freelance consulting business or their investment business. So those usually do well in my private coaching because they get a lot of one-on-one, and it's very selective because I want to make sure that the amount of time and energy invested produces a favorable outcome.
Right. And so those would align with the books you've written, and I want to get into that in a minute. But so what would a day or a week look like for you now as this type of freelance consultant? How much travel is involved, and how are you sort of planning your week, I would say?
Yeah, a great question. Freelance consulting, it's a lot of, I'm in control of my own schedule. So, if I want to take a day off, I take a day off. But for example, I just got back from New York City from another consulting project, who again was with the electronic health records. So, but essentially I'm traveling usually 6 to 7 months out of the year, is usually on average. Back in 2016, 2017, I was pretty much, and I wrote this in my third book, I was traveling pretty much 11 months out of the year. So, but that was just another issue because I was just so gung ho. But typically 6 to 7 months out of the year traveling. Meetings probably once or twice a week. It's very variable and flexible. So it depends on what the schedule needs, what the client needs, what needs to be done. But again, with consulting, you get, you're in control of your time. So you get, weekends off. You don't have to, you don't have to take call. You can get major holidays off. So it's really, the potential is unlimited.
Yeah, I think you mentioned in the book that you kind of you had a little bit of some mini burnout or maybe full-on burnout because you were traveling so much and you decided, I better dial this back, huh?
Yeah, that's I'll share the story was because after I retired and then I was thinking the next phase. So what I essentially did was I took all of my energy that I previously invested in my orthopedic career, and then I basically put it full on into my consulting career. So, and it took a toll on my personal life, and with my physical, I was low energy, So it's very important that as a freelance consultant that you really structure time for what they call work-life balance. So investing in your health, make sure you're getting enough rest, exercise, eating properly, make sure you're investing in your relationships with your kids, don't forget about, your family, all of that. So, cause you can really easily get sidetracked and just go full on, just workaholic mode, which is not the best thing to do.
Yeah, I think it's something that comes up here quite often, particularly when I'm interviewing other coaches. They're like, okay, we get burned out and we have this sort of urgency, desperation really to get out of whatever's supposedly burning us out. But if you don't really resolve the internal issues, the personal issues that led to that, it's not only the fact that you're kind of working in a system that kind of promotes that, but it also it's a piece of it that's from ourselves that allow us to do that in the first place, and we're likely to do it again the next time and the next time unless we address those issues. So it's a good point.
Yeah, no, as a cohort, physicians, we're very type A, we're very driven, so it's
something we need to watch out for. So this is kind of a leading question, but you mentioned, so is that kind of part of the reason you wrote the book? I guess we can talk about that. What prompted you to write this latest book, and tell us about it, and maybe give us the title and so forth.
Yeah, so this book is it's called The Physician's Guide to Financial Freedom. It's the third book in my series, helping physicians achieve financial freedom, and it's focusing on getting started in consulting. And so it shows physicians how to build, launch their brand, and not only build and launch their brand as a freelance consultant, but how to position, leverage, and capitalize on niche opportunities coming up. So for example, a lot of industries are changing. So in the book, I talk about how it's important to always have an eye towards the future, how to be able to pivot and shift. But I wrote this book. My first book was my autobiography, and I thought that was it, but I always wanted to look to the next step and the next thing. And so my next phase was to write books around each of the businesses that I had created that set me free. And so in a couple of reasons was to be able to extend my reach. So people that, couldn't reach me as a coach, or if they couldn't reach me via phone or online, there's always the book. So, and a book is great because you always come up with new ideas and solutions. So, and even though this is a third book, it's my best book thus far in terms of ideas, potency. And then the second reason was to reach a segment of physicians who think that they have no options outside of clinical care. So one of the biggest objections I get from clients is that they think that an MD is only of use in patient care. And I really tell them from day one to get rid of that idea, because it's just mainstream groupthink. Because if you think about it, board certified physicians were the most intelligent, hardworking, experienced, highly trained, stand-up citizens. So in my idea of the potential of how you can use an MD, 1% to 2% of potential opportunities are in patient care, but the other 98 to 99% is based on how skilled and effective a physician is in the business or entrepreneurial sense. So there's an infinite number of avenues that I talk about in the book that are more lucrative, more rewarding, and more fulfilling than just patient care.
No, that's absolutely right. And, if you think about it, you've got the biological stuff in the background, and you're right, the stand-up citizen, I love that, because pretty much if you hire a physician, they're going to be responsible. We're trained not to ever screw up and let things drop, right?
Right.
Because of this whole malpractice and all that. And again, we can get ourselves in trouble because we're so accountable and work so damn hard. So who wouldn't want to hire somebody like that? Not to mention all of the other, things you've learned over the years. So, yeah, I agree 100%.
Yeah. And one thing that I noticed is that, which is another reason I wrote the book, was just in terms of, traditionally how a physician got a job was, he submitted his CV, his chairman, his program director, whoever recommended him for that position. And that's how it goes. But in the real world, when you're transitioning out of a clinical career into, freelance consulting, it's more unpredictable and unstable. So physicians really need to learn how to network, how to speak, and how to brand themselves, how to promote themselves. So I talk about in the book the importance of how to network effectively. So traditional methods of networking don't really work. So I talk about the next level of networking, which is, through platforms like LinkedIn, through writing books, through speaking, things like that will brand yourself more favorable as a expert. And it also talks about how to leverage technology like social media, online marketing. And not only that, once you establish a brand, you have to learn how to position, leverage, capitalize, and you also have to know how to protect and enhance their brand. So that's really the unique selling proposition of the book, is that it goes into really how to, not only how to become a consultant, but then how to flourish as one.
Okay. No, that makes sense. So I was going to ask earlier, but you've kind of answered the question here. So, I can't just quit what I'm doing and then, come up with this consulting gig and, kind of equal my salary within a few months? It sounds like there's a fair amount of prep, and you advise like starting to work on this part-time while we're still employed?
Yes. Right. That's a great question. I don't recommend any physician quitting medicine cold turkey. I don't recommend any resident just, quitting their training program. I recommend all people, finish their training, whatever, because I think finishing your training puts you in a better position in terms of just your overall career opportunities. But in general, on average, I've seen it takes about 1 to 2 years of preparation for a career change in terms of the mindsets, the attitudes. You have to get your finances ready, because it's gonna be more of an unstable type of income. You have to be prepared to hear a lot of no's, and you have to be able to tolerate a lot of social pressures. So it's good to start part-time. So one of the key mindsets that helped me was to always be thinking about and monetizing various sources of income streams. So whether that's in real estate, stocks, writing, anything part-time that'll help you generate additional income. So even consulting opportunities, you can do it. And I know a lot of my clients, they're at home doing chart reviews and things like that. Another one of my clients has been writing her book before work and in the wee hours of the night. So, start here. The key is that you want to start small, gain experience, be able to monetize that, grow and scale that, gain your financial freedom so that it frees up your time to pursue other avenues full time. So that's really the key there.
Yeah, so that kind of triggered some thoughts in me. I've talked to other people who, like you said, you talked about speaking and writing. So, if you had an interest in a particular niche and, you're starting to learn about it, maybe you already know a lot about it, maybe you start writing and publishing some articles. It's not maybe the same as writing a full book like you have, but then that gets out there. You're on LinkedIn, you're sharing your profile, you're starting to develop some networks, and so this all kind of builds over time, but you don't just leave everything else behind while you're doing that.
Exactly. Yeah. Don't, like I said, just start it as a side hustle, as a side, thing, as a hobby, make it grow. And then once you grow it and scale it up to a position where you're ready to leave your full-time job, then, go ahead but just don't just jump without making any plans and preparations, because a career change is a major life decision. A lot of factors go into it. So make sure you're ready in terms of just your knowledge, your education. I know a lot of the Seek attendees, they, go to conferences. So that's really great. They're investing in their education, getting informed beforehand so they know what they're actually getting into.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I would imagine, like you said, if you're doing it part-time and you do get a client and you successfully meet their needs or solve their problem, well, that becomes a testimonial to the next one, and you've demonstrated, and that's where the scaling comes in, right? Where now you can do bigger companies or multiple clients and just kind of repeat.
Yeah. For example, when I was starting out, I took all that time that I was placing out, the 100+ hour work weeks, and I was doing that and creating my business. So, for the first year and a half, two, you don't see anything. But then after that, you land your first client, you land your first sale, and then that gives you added confidence. So really that 2-year period is just an investment period. So you're educating yourself, you're putting the what I call the sweat equity into your company, into your business. And what it does is you don't see it, but what it is it's the law of sowing and reaping. So whatever you put into something, you'll see the return. You may not see it now, but 10 years, 20 years later, you'll see the return. So you really, your first client, then as you were saying, they you do a great job for them. They give you a good review, and that leads to the next client, and all of a sudden it starts to compound itself. So that's the way building a company works. So you're not going to see a payout right away, but for example, you may invest 5 to 10 years in building your company, but then you'll be free for the last 30 to 40 years of your life.
Right. Mm-hmm. Excellent. Well, a lot of that's covered in your book, like you said, The Physician's Guide to Financial Freedom, Getting Started as a Consultant. I like to mention that before I forget. We'll do it again at the end, and I'll have a link in the show notes. So that will be very interesting to those listeners interested in, possibly doing freelance consulting. You've covered a lot of things for potential physicians who are interested. Anything else come to mind in terms of, tactics or strategies that they should keep in mind that we commonly sort of forget?
Yeah. Oh, great question. So one is to be able to pivot and accept and embrace change. So in today's society, there's really nothing is really guaranteed or stable anymore. So you always be constantly on the lookout for trends, disruptive patterns, and be able to change and adapt quickly. That's the one thing that's really helped me in my career. Just be able to see where the future is and be able to adjust accordingly. And the other thing is just your story, and really being authentic to yourself is your one key to your success as a freelance consulting, because the more you can hone down on your particular story in your niche and what product and service you are delivering to your market, the more clear you can be on that, the more powerful you can be in terms of your effectiveness, because then you're able to reach a certain target segment and you're able to be what I call the biggest fish in a small pond, or the only fish in the pond. And so that way you protect yourself against, changes in the economy, disruptive forces, competitors, things like that. So really hone in on your particular skill set and focus on that, and don't get distracted away from that. So those two things really helped me in my career.
I've heard concerning the second point, in this, like this is true in podcasting and blogging, it's like if you can describe your audience or your customer's problem the best, they'll assume you have the solution. It's all about that clarity of exactly what are you trying to address here. And when it's like, oh, very clear, that's what I need help with, then they assume you have the solution, which hopefully you usually do. So that's very interesting.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, let's see. I think we're going to be running out of time here. So we definitely want to know how to get a hold of you, Chris. What would be the easiest way to find you?
So, my 3 books on Amazon online bookstore, you can type my name in the search, Christopher H. Liu, MD, PhD. My 3 books come up. They can email me. I'll always respond to email. It's Christopher Liu, LOO, MD, PhD @gmail.com. And then on Instagram, I'm Dr. Chris Liu, MD, PhD, and they can always reach out to me on LinkedIn as well. So.
Okay, so we can definitely go get the book. I've downloaded the book, so it's right there, and you can access that knowledge or buy a hard copy. I think, I don't know if there was a hard copy. Is there a hard copy available, or is it the?
It's available both Kindle as well as paperback as well.
And paperback, yeah, okay, and Kindle, great. But there might be someone here who would like to engage your coaching services to maybe help them make that transition. So I assume they can reach you through that email.
Yeah, they email me, and then also if you purchase the book and just let me know, and then I schedule a free 15-minute consultation service, and then see how we can best work together, how it can best suit your needs.
Excellent. Well, I'll put all that in the show notes for sure. I remember seeing at the end of the book the 15-minute kind of consult. So that's great. I will mention that as well. Well, this has been good, Chris. Any last words before I let you go?
Thanks for having me on the podcast, and just look forward to reaching out to my to the audience and engaging with them.
Yeah, then we'll definitely kind of keep track of what you're up to, and maybe have you provide us an update down the road and see what you're up to, in the future. It sounds like you're always looking for that next, big thing. And so it's fun and it's challenging at the same time, but it's so it keeps us going, right? Change and moving forward.
Exactly. Progress and growth.
Yes. All right, Chris. Well, then with that, I will say goodbye. And again, thanks so much for being with us today.
Excellent. Thanks, John.